The fisheries and aquaculture subsector in Kenya contributes about 0.6% to the country's GDP. When you go through the Kenya National Blue Economy Strategy, we're talking about increasing these to about 5% by the year 2030. And the question is, what are we doing to upscale this number and, of course, ensure that we are using our blue economy in a sustainable manner? Well, joining us this week on Inside Government, as we discuss the issues around the blue economy, we're talking to Professor James Njiro. He's the CEO of Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute, and of course, Mika Odido. He is the Africa Coordinator for the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of the UNESCO. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for joining us here. And I would want to start with you, Njiro. First of all, explain to us, how critical are our waters? And when I'm talking about our waters, I'm talking about the ocean, the seas, the rivers, the lakes, and any other water that we know of.
42% of our land is in the ocean. What we call our EEZ, Exclusive Economic Zone of Kenya, is about 245 square kilometers. Kenya land mass is about 580,000 square kilometers. So indeed, what we are saying, almost more than 42% of our land is in the water. If you hand on to other issues of, because blue economy is about water species, we have lakes, Lake Victoria, Lake Turkana, Naivasha, and several rivers. Probably that combined together gives us almost 50%, almost near 50% of percentage in terms of what we'd call a species for blue economy. Of course, I'm not counting subterranean water and the rest. So indeed, our waters are expansive. Mm-hmm. We have barely scratched them. There's a lot of potential. Our research as an institution, as if I pick only the ocean, the potential is huge. Currently, in terms of fisheries now, as a country, we are bringing in about 20,000 metric tons. Mm-hmm. Our research, which has been funded by the government of Kenya, and we want to thank the government, tells us that we have about 150,000 to 300,000 metric tons of fish. Mm-hmm. Only fish. I'm not talking about the other issues. Mm-hmm. We are currently getting about 5 billion Kenya shillings in terms of our fisheries, of the 26,000 metric tons. However, if you are able to fully exploit only the fisheries, we are able to get between 90 to 100 billion Kenya shillings per year. Huge potential, which we have not been over 100 billion Kenya shillings. Mm-hmm. And I'm only talking about only fishing, I mean, the fish. I'm not even under the issues like value addition, mm-hmm. whereby we have, let's say, canned the fish, exporting the fish in terms of value addition. Right. Although it is being done right now, and I want to thank the government once again, all these issues have been taken into perspective, and as we move on, the government is is cognizant of the potential of the blue economy. Of course, you know, they have formed a Ministry of Mining, yeah, Blue Economy, and Maritime Affairs. For the first time in this country, blue economy has been recognized as a ministry. Mm-hmm. So I think we're in the right track in terms of the government track.
Mika Odido, I mean, when you look at the African continent and more broadly, you know, the world over, there appears to be some form of a rush on who will get to the oceans first, who will get to the rivers first, the dams and the lakes, to exploit the resources that lie underneath. But have we really thought about what we are doing in there? Because the fact of the matter is, human beings have really messed up with the area that we occupy, and now we want to go to the oceans.
Maybe I begin first of all with some statistics of the ocean vis-a-vis the land. The oceans occupy more than 75% of the Earth's surface.
More than 75%?
That's 3/4. Actually, for us, we call it planet ocean rather than planet Earth. Mm-hmm. And if you look at what we know about the ocean, it's really little. The deepest part of the ocean is about 10 kilometers deep. The highest part on land is also about 10 kilometers high, Mount Everest. More than 4,000 people have been to the peak of Mount Everest. Less than 10 people, if about 5 people have been to the deepest part of the ocean. That already shows you the very big discrepancy on our knowledge of the Earth and ocean.
4,000 against less than 10.
Less than 10 people, yeah. We estimate that more than 1 million species in the ocean are not yet identified.
1 million?
Yes, they're not yet identified.
Jesus.
Similarly, we keep wondering what other resources are there, because we really know so little about the oceans. So the starting point is knowing what we have in the oceans. And to this end, the UN declared the period 2021 to 2030 the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. During this period, we are looking at developing transformative science that can help us understand the oceans better, get to know the resources, get to manage it better, get to find ways of improving the management of the oceans. We already know that the oceans control the climate on Earth. In our region, the ocean currents and the ocean temperature difference between the eastern and western part of the Indian Ocean determine the weather on in the Eastern Africa side of the continent. So by just understanding the ocean, we'll be able to project the weather much better. However, we are not doing so well as a region in understanding our oceans. If you look at...
You're talking about Africa.
Africa. If you look at, for example, the scientific publications coming out of the continent, because this would be an indicator of the knowledge that we are generating, less than 2% of publications on oceans are made by African researchers. If you consider that Africans are about 13% of the global population, there's a big discrepancy. It's even worse when you look at something like patents. There it's less than 0.04% of the patents on oceans come from Africa. So we really need to up our game. We need to understand our ocean better. There's now a rush, like you say, to move to the ocean to try and harness better the resources on it. For a long time, there was no regulations regulating how we use the areas beyond national jurisdictions. But luckily, in the course of the last 2 weeks, we've finally got a convention on the use of the areas beyond national jurisdiction. And for us, this is a big deal, because we had reached a stage where the people who had the technology would be able to rush and harness the resources without us being part of the picture.
Yeah.
But hopefully moving ahead, there's a lot of emphasis in Africa, particularly Kenya. Kenya is now a key player on the blue economy scene. Kenya is part of the high-level panel on ocean economy, which brings together several leaders who are putting key emphasis on developing the ocean economy. Kenya is also, the Kenyan president is one of the patrons of the UN Ocean Decade Alliance, which looks at how we can be able to use collectively our efforts to improve the management of the oceans during the current decade.
You see, and I like the statistics that you're giving us here, you know, that in terms of research papers, you know, we contribute less than 2.5%. But when you look at the African coastline, is one of the biggest in the world, actually. It's
6,000 kilometers.
More than 126,000 kilometers. 26,000 kilometers. And when you look at the exclusive economic zones, Africa doesn't know what happens in those waters.
Unfortunately.
Number one, we don't have the capacity to police those waters. Number two, we don't even have the capacity to venture in those waters. What is UNESCO doing to help Africa upscale their capacity?
We have been working with Africa on improving capacity for knowledge generation and to use that knowledge to manage their resources. In Kenya, for example, we worked with the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute to set up a regional training center for what we call the Global Ocean Teacher Academy, providing training both online and physically. Similarly, another area that has really been weak in many countries is having research vessels that can go out to the deep sea. Less than 10 countries out of 38 coastal countries have research vessels that can go out. But we've been able to bring together the countries in the region.
Kenya among
yes, Kenya has the RV Mutafiti that does quite a bit of work. And working with Kenya, the RV Mutafiti, working with South Africa, they also have a big vessel. They actually have a base in the South Pole. So they have a vessel, the S.A. Agalas. So together with the two countries, we've worked on regional expeditions, bringing together researchers from the region, acting both as a survey platform and as a training platform. In this way, the countries that do not have the platforms are able to also get to learn about their resources. Similarly, we've been working together with the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, using a Norwegian research vessel, the Fridge of Nansen. This has particularly been very useful. Over the last 30 to 40 years, collecting data in the coastal areas, focusing especially on fish stock assessment. We've been able to cover substantial parts of the coast. One challenge that we've had in parts of the African coast is piracy. For quite some time, we are unable to go off the coasts of Somalia and Kenya to do surveys because of piracy.
It has now been dealt with.
It's been dealt with, but getting back the research vessels, especially the ones from outside the region to move there, has been a bit slow.
Has been a challenge.
Yes.
I want to hear from Kemfrey because you are the apex body when it comes to marine research, marine and fisheries research in this country. What are you doing to ensure that you give as much research about our waters and beyond to Kenyans so that we learn how to exploit the resources that we have?
Thank you, Brian. Probably before I answer your question, in terms of exclusive economic zone, I think all is not lost. And I want to pick the case of Kenya. The government has really invested, one, in technology. What we are doing through the State Department, we have what we call Vessel Monitoring System, VMS, which has been hosted in Mombasa, a place we call Iwatoni. And the function of the vessel monitoring system is we are able to see all the vessels which are entering our EEZ because it's very expansive. It's about 400 kilometers from Mombasa to the last part. It's not possible to...
It is almost the same distance from Nairobi to Mombasa.
Exactly. It's not possible to police. So we have to use technology to be able to monitor what is happening in our oceans. On top of that, the government has also been very gracious, like in our case, in terms of information. We have a vessel which was one time donated by Belgium. It's called it RV Mtafiti. We have been able to scan the entire EEZ. And that's why I was telling you we have resources up to 300,000 metric tons. So we have done this using the resources given by the government. The government has funded this resort, this work. The last time we had the Friends of Nansen and the FAO working on our waters was somewhere in 1980. That's almost 40 years ago. That's what I'm saying, as a research institution and as a country, the emphasis now is towards the blue spaces, especially in the ocean. And on top of that, the government has also come out with an organization, a multi-agency, which includes the Navy, the police, the judiciary, and the rest. We call it a Kenya Coast Guard. And the government has also facilitated them with a vessel. We call it a PV Ndoria. This vessel is supposed to track who is entering into our water to save our resources. And they are working very closely with the State Department through Kenya Fisheries Service, using what I'm calling the VMS, the vessel monitoring system, so that you don't have to keep running around the oceans like headless chicken. It is very expensive to fund a vessel. Mutafiti, for example, to fund it for 10 days to go into the ocean, we're talking about 10 million Kenya shillings. It's quite expensive. I think probably it's the same amount of money to fund or to fuel PV Noria to go out in the ocean without even by bringing the issues of the crew on board and the rest. So technology will be the key. And we are partnering very closely with other countries around the region. Tanzania have got a very similar system of VMS. Seychelles have a very similar system. And the government, through the State Department, is also coming out with other policies. One of them, of course, is the national ocean policy. We are reviewing it. We have rights, regulations, and all these are geared towards exploitation of our blue economy in this country. So the government is seized of this matter, and I said the government has also a ministry now, ended by our CS, the Honorable Mvurya, which is State Department of Mining, Blue Economy, and Maritime Affairs. Maritime and blue economy are very close, because in terms of blue economy is not only the fisheries. We have tourism, we have shipping, and we have, of course, fisheries we are talking about. So the two are very complementary to each other. And I think where I'm seated, we're in the right track. We have capacity as we move on. We might not be having everybody else on board. The other thing the government has done, when we flag ships or we license the ships in this country to go to fish or to do any other work, we don't have Kenyans to do this work. So the government tasked Kenya Marine and State Department to train young Kenyans. Okay? Now we have trained to close to 500 young Kenyans, so that when we give license to anybody who comes to fish on our Kenya, we give them accommodation. Let's say 30% or 40% that will come in the regulation. You have to board our people. And I can tell you, the young Kenyans, like we have done stock assessment. When the government funded us to do stock assessment on the number of stocks I've told you, we had to import labor from West Africa. You know, our young Kenyans are looking for jobs. But now that is past, because the government has enabled us to train. We are now talking very closely with the big people in the ocean, like the Spaniards. I think there's a meeting next week, so that when we give them license, we have our Kenyans on board. I can tell you quickly as I conclude, one of these people in 6 months, in a month they get about 1,000 Kenya shillings. If you multiply that in 6 months, you can guess that within 6 months, a young Kenyans from Kaloleni will have pocketed about $600, because on board they are given everything. $600, if we multiply with the currency now in Kenya, that young man will be talking about how much? 600 times, even if it's 100. We're talking about 800,000 in 6 months. This is going to have a ripple effect. And of course, the bottom up, because these are the bottom people, as they move, they go back, it's going to have a big impact.
You know, I like the fact that you have enumerated, you know, the various measures that the government has put in place to ensure that this sector is well capacitated. But when you look at the budgetary constraint, when you look at the human capacity, we have a huge shortage of marine researchers, marine scientists. What are you doing to ensure that these two main issues are addressed?
True. We have challenges in terms of human capacity, but as I said again, our government is working very closely with other institutions. I'll pick, for example, like seafarers. You know, these people are going on board. A curriculum which has been approved by Kenya Maritime Authority, which is now being handled by Badari College, is being worked upon. So in these lower candas, we are working very closely with the Bandari College and other institutions outside the country, South Africa, Namibia, and the rest, to try and bridge the human capacity which is lacking. In terms of degrees, yes, we also have a shortage in some of the key areas like geology and very other key areas. But again, we are working very closely with the universities like University of Nairobi, which has a geology department, oceanographic department. But one thing, Brian, is that our young scientists, our young graduates, they do not want to take some of these courses. If you ask your son or your daughter today, when you grow up, what do you want to become? I can tell you nobody says about marine. They will tell you, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor. But we are saying the next frontier for this country, Kenya, is the blue space. So what we are doing, or what we should do as a country, is also to create awareness. Because if you have to exploit the blue space, we need scientists, we need people with that expertise. So it is you, me, and I who have to create awareness like you are doing now, and tell our young Kenyans that the next jobs, and actually the way we have seen the next jobs, probably will be the marine sector or the blue economy. Because like in government from where I am, we are not employing anymore. So what you are doing in a blue space, it will create jobs, in terms of blue collar jobs.
Very well. Odido, I want to hear from you the issues of unreported and illegal activities within our jurisdiction. I mean, it's quite widespread, and the government is aware that some Asian countries, they are very busy within our waters doing, we don't know what they are doing there. And bearing in mind that Kenya, as we stand now, we do not have the capacity, yes, to police our exclusive economic zones. What is IOC doing to help Kenya's capacity, to enhance Kenya's capacity?
The countries have now developed significant capacities. The VMS, like he has mentioned, the vessel monitoring system, and then like them, they have the Doria, the Seychelles also have got fairly good capacities. But then we also have countries in the region that still do not have the capacities, from which some of the foreign vessels will go and then move into the national jurisdictions. And though you might be able to see them, chasing them might be a bit of a challenge. Mm-hmm. So that's an area that really needs to be worked on. Mm-hmm. IUU is really a challenge, and I think this has been discussed at the regional level within the AU, within the East African community, mm-hmm. The illegal and unreported fisheries.
Coast Guard, to help in, policing our waters. Do we have any idea how far we are from achieving this?
The focus of the regional collaboration has been on the piracy, and on that they have really made very, very good progress. Together with partners such as the EU, they have really been able to police the areas and reduce piracy. That's one area that collaboration has really helped.
By the year 2030, how do we expect our oceans to look like?
So science will be very key, because every decision to be made in the ocean has to be based on science, and that's where Kenya Marine comes very handy in terms of science. And of course also during that assembly, the UNGA assembly, 75th, I think, assembly, mandated IOC UNESCO to be the implementer. So what I'm saying in the real sense, Maika here with the Nairobi office is supposed to be the implementer of the decade. So we expect as we go towards 2020, late 20s and 2030s, I mean before 30, we'll have been able to gather enough information, either from data gotten by our countries or through donors, and the policies which will be made then will be based on substantial data which have been collected. We hope also by then the countries will have put in mechanism which will mitigate issues of deterioration of the oceans, because if we do not do that, we are told probably like in 2050, if you look at things like plastics, for example, we are told in 2050, if we continue business as usual, we'll be having more plastic in water than fish. Yeah. We're talking about 900,000 metric tons as compared to 850,000 metric tons. So it is our view, and it is our hope that through what IOC is doing, which is being cascaded to the countries of which have oceans, through our president. Our president is in the Ocean Decade panel. Decade. He's also in the high-level panel, as he said. With all this concerted effort, we expect a sustained in terms of sustainability in terms of the resources we'll have in the ocean. That is our expectation, and we don't expect less than that.
It is me and you, yes. Definitely. It's a collective responsibility. Well, I can see time is not really on our end, but I want to hear from Mika. The seventh session of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, Subcommission for Africa and Adjacent Islands is happening in Nairobi. I want to hear from you two things. What do we expect out of this meeting, and of what impact will be the resolutions of this meeting be to us as Africa?
We are looking forward to how we come to work together in the coming in the coming period. 3 areas have already been flagged. The first one is how do you harness science to develop a sustainable ocean economy? And this one area that many countries are really interested in. The economy is the really important thing for all our countries. The other area they're looking at is ocean health. How do we improve the health of the oceans? Pollution has already mentioned by Prof. How do we reduce the pollution? How do we ensure that we clear the pollution that's already there? The other area that's been flagged is climate change adaptation. Climate change is not just affecting land, but as the atmosphere warms, the oceans also warm. The ocean has been acting as a carbon sink, but this really has serious repercussions. We already have coral reefs which are bleaching, and these are areas that we really need to address. And of course, we are looking at ocean technology. How do we improve the technology? How do we improve the ocean literacy? In many of our countries, the coastal areas, we've had very good relationship with the sea. The sea has really been inspiring. You look at the music of the people at the coast, you look at their culture, there's a lot of interaction with the ocean, and this is something that we need to strengthen.
We expect the discussions, the solutions which will be made at the end of the day to enhance and create more synergies amongst ourselves. As we said, in IOC and people with the ocean, we talk about one ocean. We don't have 5 oceans. There's no Indian Ocean, there's no Atlantic. Those are just names. Because at the end of the day, what is happening in Pacific, Atlantic is affecting us. So at the end of the day, as we conclude this session, as Africans, we also want to have our message, because from here we are going to go to the Assembly somewhere in June, July, which will be held in Paris. We want to go with the one message to the rest of the world. Africans are ready to work together with the rest of the world, and especially in terms of data. And we need to work this as a team, because at the end of the day, the ocean is not African Ocean, is not European Ocean. It is one ocean. What they are doing, or what we are doing in terms of greenhouse effect, and most of it probably is in the developed countries, because we don't emit. Our emission in terms of gases is about 0.0%. When you compare things like China, America, the greatest polluters, allow me to use that one, the impact, what is happening in Europe and America is affecting us. And when it comes to some of the resolution they make, we'd want them to be more committal in terms of financial, so that at the end of the day, the poor African in Kenya, when you tell him not to cut down a tree, there has to be a compensation for that. But as we move together, we hope at the end of the day we'll be able to reach where we have destined to reach. I thank you.
Thank you very much. You have been watching Inside Government, and of course our conversation this week has been around the oceans, and you have heard it from the experts. The oceans are our future, and we need to take care of our oceans. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Thank you for your time. We do this again on Friday next week. Until then, have yourself a good afternoon.